Hi everyone, and welcome to the launch of the report that was released today on Australian food and beverage manufacturers' policies and commitments related to nutrition. It's awesome to see so many people here and so many people interested in the findings of that report. We've had more than 300 registrations for the webinar, so a great number and diversity of people joining us online here. My name is Adrian Cameron, and I'm the director of the Refresh Next Generation Centre of Research Excellence, which is hosting the event. And the aim of that centre is to use research evidence to help create healthier retail food environments. So this is obviously a really important webinar for us, given the focus on the healthiness of the food that's sold in Australia and what Australian food companies are doing around nutrition. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their ancient connections to land, sea and community. I think we have people here today from all over the country, but our campuses at Deakin University are located on the lands of the Wadawurrung, Wurundjeri, Boonwurrung and Gunditjmara people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples throughout Australia, including those who are joining us today. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we get going officially. So first thing is that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared on the Refresh Next Generation website, and the details of that will be sent to you later. This is a Zoom webinar. So for everyone's listening pleasure, apart from the presenters, the cameras and microphones have been turned off. But so you don't miss anything, we will be sharing any links mentioned throughout the presentation in the chat. And really importantly, we're going to have a question and answer Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So as we go, please think about what questions you would like to ask Gary and Catherine, our presenters, and do add those questions via the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And Gary and Catherine will have a session answering those later on. And finally, we'll also send out an email at the end of the webinar with a one-page summary of what was presented today and a link to the full report that you're very welcome to share with your colleagues. We're also going to send out a short feedback survey, and it would be really, really helpful to us if you were able to fill that out as well. So our agenda today, we have two really outstanding speakers with us today. And firstly, we will hear from Professor Gary Sachs about what Australian food and beverage manufacturers are doing to promote good nutrition and importantly, where there might be room for improvement. And then we'll hear from Professor Catherine Backholer, who will share with us about the influence of food marketing on children's health. And finally, as I mentioned, Gary and Catherine will be more than happy to answer everyone's questions in the Q&A session at the end, and we'll hopefully have 15 or 20 minutes for that session at the end. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Gary Sachs, our first speaker. Gary is the co-director of GLOBE, which is the Global Centre for Preventive Health and Nutrition at Deakin University. He's a chief investigator on the Refresh Next Generation Centre of Research Excellence that's hosting the webinar. And Gary also co-founded Informus, which is where some of the methods that we use for the assessment come from today. So over to you, Gary.
Thanks, Adrian, and thanks to everyone for joining. It's fantastic to have such a good turnout and such diversity of groups on the call. And so just to start off this presentation, just some context to this report that we've released today. We clearly understand that to address unhealthy diets, we need a comprehensive societal approach, including actions from governments, the food industry and society more generally, in order to improve the healthiness of our food environments and in that way address unhealthy diets. And our focus, if I can just get the slides to work. Our focus is obviously today on the role of the food industry and the actions they're taking the other bit of context that I think is really important for this report is that currently government policy in Australia really relies strongly on voluntary company action. So through the Healthy Food Partnership, that's a voluntary initiative trying to encourage the food companies to reformulate their products. The Health Star rating is a voluntary front of pack labeling system, and on marketing to children, the government policy there relies heavily on industry taking voluntary steps to reduce marketing of unhealthy food to children. And so within that context, our aim in this report, which we've called Inside Our Food and Beverage Manufacturers, is to assess the largest food and beverage manufacturers in Australia on their policies and practices for improving population nutrition. We first did this assessment in 2018, and what we're presenting on today is the 2024 follow-up to that study. So it's about 5 years since we last looked at this, and I'll talk about how the results compare to 2018, so the focus today is obviously on food and beverage manufacturers. You may have seen us present results related to supermarkets a few weeks ago, and we will later in the year present the results for the quick service restaurant or fast food industry. The methods we use for this report is based on methods developed by the Global Informis Network. The study has been going for, this particular study has been about 12 months in the making, where we tailored the global Informis approach to assessing food companies to the Australian context. We selected the companies for inclusion and briefed them on our assessment approach. We invited all of the companies that we assessed to participate in the process. And what that involved is, for each company, we collected information on their policies and practices based on what's available publicly, but companies were invited to supplement that info, make sure we collected everything and just verified that everything was okay, that we got the most accurate and up-to-date information about each company. And then we assessed each company based on best practice, and prepared a scorecard for each company to highlight where they were doing well, and trying to identify areas for improvement. And companies were briefed on their scorecards before we've gone public with the results. And so I really want to thank the companies that participated in the process. It was a really engaging process all the way through. Yeah, it's an important part of the process, working with companies to understand their policies and practices. The areas we assessed companies are listed on the screen there. So it looks at, and I'll go through each of these areas as I present the results, but just to give a flavor of the results, we looked at overall company strategy, the company policies and commitments around product formulation and new product development, nutrition labeling, marketing to kids, product accessibility and affordability, so kind of where products are sold and their prices, as well as the disclosure of relationships with external groups. Now, those domains were based on World Health Organization recommendations on where food companies should be acting, as well as other key benchmarking exercises in this area globally. The weighting, each company got a score out of 100, and the weighting is shown on the screen there. Those weightings were developed based on where experts within Informis felt companies could have the most impact on our food environments, and where it was feasible for them to take action. Just a point to note about how we defined healthy foods throughout our assessment. We based our definition on government definitions of what is healthy and what's not. and based on both the Australian government and international governments. It's important to recognise that these definitions of unhealthy food or healthy food should be based on our recommendation is for them to be based on evidence-based systems. So in the Australian context, we use the Australian Dietary Guidelines as our principal way of defining healthy and unhealthy foods. In some cases, it was also based on the Health Star rating, which is obviously a government-endorsed nutrient profiling system for Australia. We did also, for some indicators, base our assessment on the level of processing of foods in recognition of the emerging evidence around ultra-processed foods and their impact on health, as well as recognition that some governments around the world are now using NOVA and degree of processing as part of their food policy. So here are the results, which I'll talk through. So the average score out of 100 for the companies we looked at was 50 out of 100. And just a glance at that scorecard shows quite a large variation. These are all really large companies in Australia. You can see the extent to which these companies are addressing nutrition varies quite substantially. So the top score there is 65 out of 100, and the lowest score is 23 out of 100. I think the fact that the highest score is 65 shows that even the top performing companies have a huge way to go to meet best practice in the area of nutrition. Compared to 2018, scores have improved. So the average was 42 out of 100 last time around, now up to 50 out of 100. And so that shows some improvement. But I think from where we sit, progress is slow, and probably given the importance of the problem, not fast enough from where we're sitting. I'll go through in this presentation each of the domains, and I'll call out some of the good practices in that area. I think important to just note that corporate strategy was the highest scoring domain, and product affordability and accessibility was the lowest scoring domain. Some progress in almost all of those domains over the last 5 years, but just minimal progress, I would say. So I'll go through each domain in turn. In corporate strategy, what we mean there is we're looking at companies' commitments to addressing nutrition as part of their overall strategy, the way they report on nutrition, and their targets there, as well as how companies arrange their governance around nutrition. So what we found is that almost all companies now acknowledge the important role that they can play in addressing population nutrition. And so I think that's a really important point. Gone are the days where food companies are denying their role. All companies understand the importance of their actions in this area. But most companies lack detail in how they report, what they commit to in the space of nutrition. We found 4 companies publicly report on the proportion of their sales from healthy products. And we found 9 companies report on their governance structures around nutrition. And so I think what we're looking for in this area is for companies to identify nutrition as a priority focus area, to set clear targets around the proportion of sales from healthy products. And why that's important as an overarching commitment is it indicates a whole of company focus on improving their nutrition actions. As mentioned before, our recommendation is for companies to adopt government-endorsed standards for how they define healthy and unhealthy foods, and also to report on their governance structures. So there's an example there of Kraft Heinz, who show that nutrition responsibility for nutrition is at the executive level within their company. We've just highlighted a couple of examples, which I'll do in each domain. Unilever report on their sales from healthy foods using a range of government-endorsed definitions of healthy food. And Nestle also report on their sales from healthy and unhealthy foods. So those examples are kind of showing what's possible in that area. So I'll go through each domain. I'll spend a couple of minutes on each one like I just did. In the area of product formulation, the expectation from a public health point of view is for companies to have clear targets for how they're going to address nutrients of concern across their portfolio. So that's sodium, saturated fat, sugar. Our expectation is to have clear targets there, and for companies to report on that routinely on the healthiness of their portfolio and how it has changed over time. And in the Australian context, to report on their engagement with the Healthy Food Partnership. So the up on screen there is just showing the current unhealthy state of our packaged food supply. We found that most manufacturers have taken some steps to improve the healthiness of their products, but the way they reported on that and how comprehensive those steps are varied very widely. Only 8 of the companies had what we call SMART goals around improving the healthiness of their products, and only 9 companies were participants in the Healthy Food Partnership, which involves pledging to meet the government targets around particular nutrients in particular food categories. And so I think that's just showing, I would say, pretty low engagement with such an important initiative. Some leading practice examples there are up on screen where ARNETs have really clear targets around meeting the government's Healthy Food Partnership targets. Mars Food and Nutrition also have some really clear targets with dates, and they report on those around what they're doing to improve the healthiness of their portfolio. And Simplot, we've highlighted as an example there of how they're reconfiguring parts of their portfolio. They've acquired some healthier brands in an effort to have a healthier set of products overall. So not all things in this area need to relate to reformulating existing products. It can be through new product development or product acquisitions. So our recommendations are there, as I've touched on, is to have specific targets around improving the nutrient profiling of the portfolio, routinely reporting on that, and reconfiguring portfolios to focus on healthier products. And that's a way of meeting those sales targets that we spoke about in the previous domain. Moving on to the nutrition labeling domain. In the Australian context, what we expected to see here is clear commitment to implement the Health Star rating. Also, this domain covers providing nutrition information for all products online, using health and nutrition claims in a responsible way, and also some voluntary labeling of things like trans fats. The context here is the implementation of the Health Star rating is well below government targets for uptake. So the system's been around for 10 years. Current uptake is at 32%, according to the government's latest figures, which is substantially below government targets. So we found only 4 companies had publicly committed to fully implement the Health Star rating on all of their eligible products. We found only 8 companies provided comprehensive nutrition info for all their products online. And only just 2 companies committed to label trans fats on their products. But we did find a couple of good examples of companies making commitments to only put nutrient content claims like 99% fat-free, for example, on products that are overall healthy. So those were some good examples coming through. Some other good examples, McCain have voluntarily voluntarily implemented the Health Star rating on all their products. Arnott's have some really strong commitments there. And Danone is an example internationally of a company that's committed to only have nutrition claims on their healthy products as they define them. So the recommendations in this area is full implementation of the Health Star rating on all eligible products and reporting of progress there. I think it's a pretty reasonable expectation to have all nutrition information online. Also label trans fats and as I said, only make nutrition content claims when the product's healthy. Moving through these domains, we've got through three more to go. Here we're talking about promotion practices, which contributes 30% to the overall score out of 100. This covers marketing to children and the exposure of children to unhealthy food ads, as well as just the way that the marketing spend is allocated to healthy versus unhealthy products. The context here is that the kids in Australia are exposed to a heap of unhealthy food ads, and so that's online, TV, sports sponsorship, as well as on product packaging, where a recent study we did showed 94% of products that have product packaging that has elements that appeal to children, 94% of those are unhealthy foods. So in this area, the industry self-regulatory code was updated since our previous assessment and now applies to all companies. But from a public health point of view, that code clearly falls far short of recommended best practice, and the monitoring and compliance associated with that code again falls far short of best practice. So we only found one company that committed to not target children under 18 years of age through their marketing of unhealthy foods, and almost all companies only committed to limit advertising of unhealthy products, but they didn't include their brands as part of that, and so in that way it falls short of best practice. We also found 8 companies had some policies and commitments around responsible marketing affecting the whole population, so moving broader than just children. And I think there's some clear best practice examples here where some of the companies are reporting on their marketing spend, dividing it up by how much they're spending marketing healthy products and unhealthy products, and how much of that spend goes to adults and children. And so I think there's a clear room for improvement here on both the commitments in this area and the reporting of company practices. So our clear recommendation in this area, given the importance of protecting children from unhealthy food marketing, is for companies to reduce the exposure of kids to unhealthy marketing. So that's all kids across all media, including product packaging and sports sponsorship. And then the expectation is for companies to have much more detailed reporting on their marketing spend, and to shift that towards healthier products. The 5th area out of 6 is product accessibility and affordability. This domain is worth 5% of the overall score, and it includes increasing the distribution of healthy products, increasing the affordability of healthy products, particularly relative to unhealthy foods. And really the way to do that is through engagement between food manufacturers and retailers. We also looked at the extent to which food industry supports evidence-based policies for improving nutrition, and so I can talk to that. This was the area where companies scored the worst. We found few examples of companies having clear, comprehensive actions here. So 3 companies had policies around limiting the availability of unhealthy products in schools, Internationally, there are clear examples of companies making strong commitments in that area, but we found less commitment there in Australia. There were some examples reported of how food manufacturers are engaging with supermarkets to improve the health, to make sure that their healthy products were distributed in all areas, and also engaging with supermarkets about, say, things like price promotions and in-store promotions to find a way to favor healthy products as part of those price promotions. So as an example, Woolworths have I think it's called the Supply Sustainability Council, I think it's called. And some companies reported how they're engaging with that as part of efforts to make sure their healthier products are the ones on promotion. So I've just got a couple of examples there internationally. Co-op, which is a UK supermarket, pledged that they will ensure that their healthier products are at least no more expensive than standard versions of their product, which I think shows the way that it's possible to make commitments in that area. An interesting example we found internationally is the case of Tony's Chocolonely, which is, I think they're the largest chocolate manufacturer in the Netherlands, and they have a very clear commitment on their website to support a sugar tax in the Netherlands. And I think I like that example because that's a chocolate company recognizing that the evidence that price is a really important lever, recognizing the evidence that sugar taxes have been really effective, and they commit to supporting evidence-based government policy in that area. Our final domain is the disclosure of relationships with external groups. And this area is recognizing that internationally and in Australia, there's a lot of evidence of food companies engaging with governments and community groups, really in efforts to influence policy in their direction. And so I think the public health evidence shows that disclosure in this area is a starting point for helping everyone understand some of that lobbying practices and industry involvement in the community. And so leading practice in this area is for companies to declare all of their external relationships and their political activities. 6 companies in Australia declare that they don't make any political donations. I'm not 100% sure what they incorporate in it as part of that political donations, but it's great to see that sort of commitment from those companies. We found no companies publishing their submissions to public consultations. In some cases, when government's consulting on policy, the government makes all submissions public, but none of the companies were voluntarily putting up their submissions so that people can understand their perspective on policies that are under consideration. So some examples here that are leading internationally. Walmart have a really comprehensive database of the grants they provide to organizations that's easy to search. Unilever have a really comprehensive, easy to search list of publications, research publications they've been involved in. And there's several other companies internationally that are really transparent about their philanthropic work. Our recommendations in this area are for companies to disclose all of their relationships, including political donations, and their policy positions in relation to nutrition policy. So that gets us through those 6 domains. And here's just a summary of those recommendations that I went through in each of those domains. An overarching recommendation is for all food companies to set targets around their proportion of sales from healthy products. And as I said, that's recognized as best practice in showing that a true company-wide commitment to healthiness. On marketing to kids, the recommendation is for companies to take serious action to reduce the exposure of kids to the marketing of unhealthy products. The recommendation is for companies to have clear targets for reducing nutrients of concern and report against how they're going against those targets. In the area of nutrition labeling, a clear expectation for companies to put the health star rating on all their eligible products. To work with supermarkets and other retailers to improve the distribution of healthy products and the relative affordability of healthy products, and to be transparent in their relationships with other groups. So, look, as an overall conclusion, it's clear to us that the voluntary action by food companies across the sector is not going far enough. Progress is painfully slow. And so that's led to our conclusion that stronger government action is needed in the space. And that echoes calls internationally for governments to mandate nutrition and sustainability reporting. It echoes calls from public health groups for health star ratings to be made mandatory and for much stronger regulation of the marketing of unhealthy foods to children. And so, just reminding everyone that we also have reports related to the supermarket sector, and we'll soon be putting out a report about the fast food industry. Before we hand back to Adrian, I'll just like to thank our team that have been involved in this work, and again reiterate my thanks to all the food companies who've engaged really closely with us in being able to look at their policies and discuss what best practice is. So thank you to all those companies.
Thanks so much for that, Gary. That was fantastic and a really comprehensive overview, I think, of where we're at in 2024 in terms of what food and beverage manufacturers are doing. Before I introduce Catherine, I just want to remind everyone about the Q&A. There should be a function at the bottom of your screen. If you've got a question for Gary or for Catherine, feel free to put those in. After Catherine, we'll get to the Q&A section. So I'll just go back to introduce you, Catherine. So just my real pleasure to introduce Professor Catherine Backholer, who with Gary is a co-director of the Global Centre for Preventive Health and Nutrition, which is GLOBE, at Deakin University. And Catherine is also a chief investigator on the Refresh Next Generation Centre of Research Excellence. So Catherine's going to tell us a bit more of the context of marketing to children and some of the research evidence in that space. So over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Adrian. Lovely to be here with you all today, and it's great to see such high numbers on the webinar. So I'm not going to take too much time, just about 5 minutes to dig deep into unhealthy food marketing. And I'll start with a day in the life of a child. So a child gets up, they might have breakfast, they might grab their cereal, which is often covered in food marketing that appeals to children. They travel to school, going past bus stops, spend their day, around after school. They leave school, they travel home from school, and they're seeing, food marketing, unhealthy food marketing on these routes to and from school. They get home, or they might go to local sports. There's often food sponsorship of these sports, so more exposures. They connect online, even more exposures to unhealthy food marketing. They may play games, they may watch TV, and we can see that children are absolutely saturated with unhealthy food marketing as they go about their physical lives and their digital lives. We have really good evidence now that when kids are exposed to unhealthy food marketing, it increases their brand loyalty, their preference for these products, and their requests, that younger kids, their requests for these products with older children, their purchasing of these products, which leads to an increased consumption of these marketed products. We have really good evidence there at the moment from a big meta-analysis and systematic review that came out of the WHO just last year. And we also have emerging evidence from some work that we've been doing at Deakin University, where we're capturing exactly what kids are exposed to in terms of harmful marketing online. So we are looking at all types of marketing online, but what I have here is some of the early findings for food marketing. So we've recruited children 8 to 13 years of age, teenagers 14 to 17, young people 18 to 25, and you can see even from the age of 8, they're getting bombarded online, 13 junk food ads for every day they spend online. Teenagers, around 24 junk food ads every day online, and similar for young people. And I'll note here that these are often not just ads that are served to them, but they're often connected to engaging buttons. So to click here to learn more about these products, to click here to purchase these products, click here to play and enter the McDonald's space on a given game. These are some examples on the screen of the types of marketing that we're seeing kids exposed to online. Young children, you know, when they're playing one of the most popular games online, they're seeing the McDonald's arches for about 3 minutes on their screens for every hour they're spent online. So no food next to that, but we know that the McDonald's branding is associated with unhealthy foods. When they're searching for things like scooter tricks and watching their favorite sports, they're just being inundated with unhealthy food marketing. We do have evidence across the globe that industry codes generally don't work. We have some analyses in Australia as well from the earlier AA&A codes, looking at complaints and what happened to those complaints, and also worldwide, that basically shows that all in all, industry codes have not been effective enough to protect our children when they go about their daily lives. They still see advertising, even if it's not child directed, they're seeing this kind of junk food advertising as they go about their daily lives. And this recent WHO report also showed that when there's government-led regulation put in place, it's more effective than when countries that have industry codes in place. We do have some examples around the world of good practice marketing controls to protect children from unhealthy food marketing. So in 2016, the Chile food labeling and advertising law meant that all marketing that is directed to children under the age of 16 was banned. So this is an example how we went from in Chile, it went from a Kellogg's box with Tony the Tiger on it to one which has these warning labels and no cartoon characters. I think what's really important with this law, though, is that there was an analysis in 2017 that showed on television, the law led to a reduction in child-directed marketing through watching television, but kids remained exposed to unhealthy food marketing because a lot of food marketing is just simply not directed at them. It doesn't include the cartoon characters, or it isn't specifically on children's TV programming. But they're still seeing this in general spaces where, especially mixed programming, where there's adults and children. So MasterChef is a perfect example. It's not a child show. It's a general audience show. So it wouldn't be classified as marketing directed to children, but kids are being exposed to this marketing on TV. And so what in Chile in 2018, they updated that law for TV to cover all marketing between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., all unhealthy food marketing, regardless of whether it was directed to children or not. And the most recent evidence shows that that's much more effective than the laws that are directed, classify marketing directed to children. Along this line, the UK in 2022 enacted the UK Health and Care Act, which meant that there would be a ban on all unhealthy food marketing between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. at night, and a total online ban for all unhealthy food marketing where there's been a commercial paid or non-monetary, a paid or non-paid transaction that's taken place to put that advertisement up online. Enacted in 2022, has not yet been implemented, but it's really taking that next step away from that child-directed approach and just trying to capture all the types of unhealthy food marketing that kids are exposed to. It is due to be implemented in 2025, so we'll watch this space. In terms of the Australian context, we are reliant on these AA and A codes mostly. They were last updated in 2021 to really focus on marketing that's directed to children under the age of 15. In 2022, the government announced a budget for a feasibility study to look at the different regulatory options for food marketing controls. 2023, we got some political momentum in terms of some of the ministers showing concern. So Sophie Scomp's introduced, or at least put forth, a private members bill, her Healthy Kids Advertising Bill, which proposed to ban unhealthy food marketing on television before the hours of 9 p.m. at night, and an online ban of all unhealthy food marketing. It's a private members bill, so it's very, very unlikely that it will go any further. But I think her reasoning for that was to start this national conversation of how can we better protect children from unhealthy food marketing. And then just recently, I'm sure many of you saw, there was a consultation out by the Department of Health and Aged Care around different regulatory options for food marketing controls. So I think, again, in Australia, it's very much a watch this space in terms of what happens. But I think as a society, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of environment do we want our kids growing up in? Do we want one that's really driven by profits and stakeholder returns of industry through their marketing practices of unhealthy foods? Or do we want one that protects our children so that they can grow up in an environment that, is good for their health? And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Catherine. I think that was a really important sort of deep dive into some of the options, both for governments and food companies, around what we can do around marketing to kids. So it's time for our question and answer session now. So we've got quite a few questions coming through, but feel free, if something you want to ask to Catherine or to Gary, just feel free to keep those questions coming. So I might start with a question to you, Gary. Someone who'd been watching you on Sunrise this morning noted that there were some companies who were included in your graphs here today that weren't included on the Sunrise program. Any comments on that?
Oh yeah, I will glad to hear that people were watching at 6:20 a.m. Melbourne time to catch that Sunrise segment. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. We sent Sunrise the full report, and the graphic they popped up on the screen only had some of the companies. I had nothing to do with that.
Okay, good, Gary. Thanks. The second question also relates to a similar question, in that some of the companies that were included in the 2018 report haven't been included in the report this year, and someone's asked about Sanitarium in particular. Can you give us an idea of why that might be the case?
Yeah, the way we chose the companies to be part of this report was based on market share information that we got from Euromonitor, and so our approach was to select the companies with the largest market share. And so that did mean that the particular companies in 2018 were slightly different to the ones in 2024.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Question for you, Catherine. Are there any other countries other than Chile who are restricting food marketing based on the time of day? I think you mentioned PM in Chile.
Not that I'm aware of, but there are countries that are starting to look at the possibility. So Norway at the moment they've approved a policy to ban unhealthy food marketing to children under the age of 18, but there's no details of that yet. So they're working out exactly what the policy provisions will be. So that's one country, I think, to follow and to see what happens. And then, the UK, I think, is really leading the way in terms of how you move from that child-directed approach to all marketing that children see. But it was, really clear in Chile, and they did update their law from this child-directed approach, at least for TV, to this watershed approach on television. But I think everyone's just, back in 2016 when this Chile law went in place, it was, it really seemed innovative and the right thing to do. It was a real world first, and now we're learning as we go along that actually it's not enough to be banning just what children see. Marketing that's directed to children, and we need to ban what children see in terms of unhealthy food marketing.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. Also, looking at comparisons to other countries, Gary, has this kind of assessment been done in other countries, and do the results there show that they're doing more for nutrition than we are in Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. So this assessment has been done in a range of countries, including in our region, in Malaysia, and then in North America and Canada, and across Europe, and in New Zealand as well. So we've now done this study in a heap of countries. What we're finding is it's a pretty similar pattern. So the largest food companies in each of those countries do vary widely in what they're doing around nutrition. The leading company varies across countries, showing that even the transnational companies tend to have slightly different policies in different countries, and I think that's just given the different contexts of each of those countries. But what we have found is in low and middle income countries, companies have far fewer commitments and are much less transparent about what they're doing around nutrition. There's a recent study underway in Senegal where, firstly, the researchers doing that study struggled to get any engagement with food companies, which made me appreciate the great interaction we do have in Australia, where food companies are happy to engage on this topic, but also the level of transparency is very low in Senegal. And so I think what that's showing is companies probably are responding to the context. There's a lot more pressure in countries like Australia for companies to be more transparent in this area. But the overall picture is that in no country are food companies taking comprehensive action to address nutrition.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. I'm going to read this question out verbatim. There seems to be a strong correlation between high health star rating and the size of the company, indicating that perhaps health star rating requirements or regulations are easier to be met by large cashed up companies who often produce the unhealthiest foods on the market and display the worst ethics. Are there any plans to accommodate small businesses producing healthier products but unable to meet extensive regulatory measures due to their business size? And I suppose that's could be a more general question, not just about health star rating, but in general, the size of the company and the ability to, score highly in these metrics.
Yeah, undoubtedly that the largest companies certainly have the resources to both in terms of how they report on nutrition and kind of the comprehensiveness of their policies in the space, but also several aspects like labeling and perhaps reformulation. It's perhaps easier for companies with higher budgets to take action there. What I find interesting is that in a lot of the engagement we've had with food companies, a lot of the smaller companies as well as the larger ones call for a level playing field on nutrition. And so in our private interactions with companies, we're seeing strong support for regulation so that there is a level playing field, which would mean that the level of resources companies have would be less important. And so I think that idea of making it a more even playing field lends more support for the need for regulation in this space.
Thanks, Gary. This one maybe for you or Catherine. Is any pressure being applied to the state or territory education departments to restrict marketing of unhealthy foods to students through canteens? There are policies related to this, but they're not enforced. So I don't know, Catherine, do you want to regard that?
I mean, our schools should be, I mean, as the question stated, should be free from unhealthy food marketing. Across the world, I think they are pretty good, but even if we do have a little bit of unhealthy food marketing within schools and in school canteens, then that's too much. I'm not, I don't know how much the the enforcement of the current policies are in the different states and territories, but there are states and territories that are getting more interested in unhealthy food marketing. We saw in 2019, the Queensland government propose a ban on unhealthy food marketing on all publicly owned assets. There was a strong industry pushback, and that actually didn't go anywhere, but we have South Australia government at the moment with a consultation open, again, proposing to restrict unhealthy food marketing on state-owned assets. So that'll be really interesting to follow. So I think the states are really interested in this, but they're mainly looking at state-owned assets and transport.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Gary and Catherine, what would be your ideal one recommendation or suggestion or ask of companies to help create a healthier food environment? So maybe one each.
I mean, I appreciate the question to ask for one recommendation, which kind of goes against our idea of there being a comprehensive approach here. But still, if I were to pick one, I really like the idea of having really clear targets for the proportion of sales that are from healthy foods. I think that's been a strong push, particularly in the UK, for companies to make commitments in that area. And the reason behind that is if there's a target to increase the proportion of healthy food sales, that drives the whole company to target those. And so it would affect marketing, labeling, product development, etc.
I mean, we published a paper today looking at the Queensland policy on restricting unhealthy food and alcohol marketing on state-owned assets. And we showed how industry really pushed back hard to water down that policy, and ultimately that policy was swept under the carpet. So if I had one action, it would be to stop lobbying government to delay and to stop regulations that will truly protect our kids from unhealthy food marketing and just healthy diets in general.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. Here's a question on, is there a risk that companies are just reporting what they know that you're going to be looking for while still engaging in harmful practices that aren't captured through your tool?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I would say in developing this tool, we've tried to focus on the areas that the evidence says are most important for companies to be taking action in. So we're trying to capture a whole range of practices there, and I think the focus on corporate reporting is really important here, so that at the moment companies are reporting on things often in a way just reporting the good news stories. And so I think it's really important that there are really clear metrics in place for what we want companies to be reporting on, so that we're able to monitor their practices in that area. So we've given it a crack in this tool for trying to focus on a wide range of things that the evidence says is important. But absolutely, it does. Maybe there's things we're missing or that companies are doing that we've missed.
Thanks, Gary. Question for you, Catherine. Is there any evidence that bans like the example from Chile are having any impact on children's obesity? And do you think there's too much reliance on that single lever to make children healthier?
I mean, I would rephrase that and say there's too much reliance on a single outcome. You know, obesity is complex. And when we think about tobacco control over the many, many years, we didn't talk about the impacts on lung disease. We talked about the impact on, you know, reductions in the prevalence of smoking. So we know that we need a comprehensive approach to tackling a complex problem. We know that industry agrees with that. We see it in all their submissions saying that we need this can't be just single policies, just like that question. We need a comprehensive approach. So how could we possibly think that a single policy is going to have a dramatic effect on obesity prevalence? So the evidence in Chile has certainly shown that when you put a ban on unhealthy food marketing, that it does reduce the purchase of those marketed products, the unhealthy products. And we know that unhealthy foods are associated with excess weight gain, with social norms around what's appropriate to eat on an every, as an everyday foods. And so I think the evidence, therefore, is, really quite strong that it will have an influence on our children's weight in the long term, alongside other policies that are put in place. And, really explicitly in Chile, the Chilean government, in their evaluation plan, on purpose did not include obesity as an outcome for all the reasons I've just said: the long lag times, the comprehensive approach needed. And that's why the focus really was on dietary intake.
Perfect. It's a big problem. It's big solutions, I guess. There's a question here, I don't know which one of you wants to answer it, around whether you think that the health star rating could or should include the NOVA or ultra processed food concept in the criteria.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I think that look, at all government policy should be based on the latest evidence, and so I think as new evidence emerges around health harms from that policies and nutrient profiling criteria like the health star rating, I think should incorporate that evidence as it emerges. And with respect to ultra processed foods, there is certainly emerging evidence of the health harms associated with that. I think from the way to incorporate it in policy, I think the government needs to be open to refining all their algorithms to take into account the latest evidence. And so that's one example of how it could be tweaked when there's strong evidence of how to do that.
Thanks.
I guess I'll just add to that. I think for me, one of the most important things around the ultra processed food classification is probably more what's not ultra processed, so what's classified as whole foods, and excluding them from policy, really. So making sure that you don't capture these whole foods that may be high in fat, but they're still whole foods like nuts and other examples, that they are excluded from policy, and then you can overlay something like the health star rating to whatever else in the food supply is left.
Methods question for you, Gary. What proportion of information in the assessment was able to be gained from publicly available information versus the company supplied information?
That's a great question. Look, in general, companies that engaged with us and were able to provide some details of their internal policies or things that we couldn't find online, they did score substantially better than companies that didn't engage in the process. But I should be clear that to get kind of top points in a particular indicator or domain, companies were rewarded for having public disclosure, and so it did boost their score. So if a company had, say, an internal policy that wasn't publicly available, and they told us about that, it did boost their score, but they couldn't get full marks for that particular indicator, because the expectation is that companies should be fully transparent about what they're doing in each area.
Okay, perfect. And maybe a last question. This one might be for you, Catherine. If you believe government intervention is needed, where do you think they should focus their attention first? I'm sure you love that question.
Well, we do have a national obesity strategy. We have a national preventive health strategy. So I think first and foremost, invest in the implementation of those strategies. We say time and time again that we need this comprehensive approach to addressing diets in Australia and globally, and we have some really good strategies that have some really good actions within them. And so if we could fund the implementation of those actions, we'd be streets ahead from where we are now.
Perfect. Well, we're 1 minute to the hour, so I might just end there by thanking Gary and Catherine so much for your presentations, but also your willingness to answer all those tricky questions. And there we go, I've got one more slide. Yeah, and just want to thank the audience for coming along as well and engaging in that way. It was really, great to be able to answer the questions of everyone who's here. As a reminder, we will be sending you an email with a link to the report, but also a questionnaire about what you thought of the webinar today and where we could improve, and we'd really love to hear back from you. And I think we would love to see many of you back for the next webinar on fast food restaurants in a few weeks' time.